Okay, hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Providend's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, Associate Advisor at Providend. Join with me today is Zheng, who is a client advisor here at Providend. Hi Ray.
Hello, hi everyone. Hi Isaac.
Yeah, thanks for coming down today. So, before we start, let's start with a quick introduction to yourself so our listeners know who you are. So, could you share what you do at Providend and how did you end up here?
So I am a client advisor here at Providend, and my role is really to work with clients to craft their wealth plans and then also to journey with them in achieving their goals. So I joined Providend in 2021, and I actually also started out as an associate advisor, just as where you are now.
Yeah.
You know, and as you would also know, the associate advisor role was really positioned to train us and prepare us to be client advisors.
Yep. So how do you end up here? Like, what was your journey like before joining Providend?
Before joining Providend, I was running my family's business. Yeah, and after I probably have shared that in one of my videos. But after much consideration, both internal and external factors, I decided to take a leap of faith and pursue my passions, which is in finance and wealth planning.
Right, thanks for sharing and being an inspiration for all the associate advisors like myself. To go through that program and to be a full-fledged client advisor like yourself. So today's topic is car ownership planning in Singapore. And why we have this topic is because in terms of owning a car, it's quite unique in Singapore in the sense that we are one of, if not the most expensive place to own a car. Not only that, you have to decide every 10 years on either renewing your COE or getting a new car. Quantitatively, when you look at the cost compared to taking public or private transport versus owning a car tend to lose out in most situations, especially after accounting for running costs, taxes, and parking. So if not for quantitative reasons or monetary reasons, what are some common reasons for wanting to own a car?
Yeah, so like you rightly pointed out, we all know in Singapore that it's very costly to own the car. So typically, the reasons for wanting to own a car really has to be quite justifiable. Well, in general, I would say there are probably two types. You know, the practical type of reasons and also the aspirational reasons. Yeah, so I mean, for people with from different backgrounds, say for example, those with younger children or elderly to take care of, car ownership seems very obvious, right? Because of the convenience of the utility they can derive from owning the car. Yeah. The other more aspirational reasons are also quite common actually, because there are people who require like maybe the status of having to own that car. Yeah. But generally there's also this, I would say that there's this understanding that once people started, especially for our clients who have already owned the car for some time, right, as they journey through life, they also have gotten used to that lifestyle and they actually want to maintain that. Yeah, so typically such clients, they'll start off with some practical reason. Towards the later stages of their life or retirement, they actually find that it's also more aspirational. They just want to maintain the lifestyle that they have gotten used to.
Right, so they start, like you mentioned, is utility at first.
Yeah.
But after that, maybe their kids have grown up, or maybe their parents are no longer around, but they're too used to that lifestyle, and it's quite hard to go back in lifestyle.
Yeah, but for the aspirational side of things, I mean, I definitely do know of people in various in certain positions or industries. I mean, a very common example is that business owners tend to require certain level of status to project an image in perhaps in their business. For some, I'm not saying all, right? So having certain brand of cars actually might be may have some utility, some functional reason for that purpose, and it is quite valid. Yeah. Personally, I also actually do know of friends and peers who are really car enthusiasts, and they are really into the machinery, the equipment. And in recent years, when electric vehicles, EVs came on trend, I mean there is a wide and loyal following about EVs in general, and these people actually would want to own an EV simply for aspirational reasons.
Right. So it just sometimes it's just for their passion, to fulfill their, or even to showcase their belief. I mean, if they are buying EVs just to show that they want to support this cause, this movement of EVs taking over ICE vehicles.
That's right.
Okay, so in terms of planning for a car purchase, in terms of what the clients typically ask you or tell you, what do you know about how they plan their own purchase prior to meeting you?
Yeah, so be it clients or personal friends and family, I mean, the general sense that I get is that people tend to be, they definitely start with the idea of affordability, budgeting, right? They usually start from that. But I think one of the common way they start is that they consider how they can afford it today. One thing that they don't usually consider is that how does purchasing a car impact future goals. Yeah, so typically there will be two scenarios or two kinds of people who, when they plan about cars, there are two kind of reactions. So for some who know that they definitely have more than enough to afford it, they'll just go ahead and purchase it, no hesitations. Yeah, then the question becomes of what brand, what size of car, etc. lah, right? The other kind of reaction that usually we'll hear of is that they hesitate. So these people, when they hesitate, for this group of people, the hesitation really stems from more of, do I really want the car? Do I really need the car? How is that going to... the question that really goes through their minds is that, how is this going to affect my other goals? So that's where the hesitation comes in, right? But generally, regardless of what reaction, the fallback is to just look at, can I afford it today? And then if I take on a loan for the next 3 to 5 years, can I pay off that loan with whatever income that I am earning today?
Right, so they just look at their bank account.
Yep.
And they're like, okay, if I have a lot of excess, they'll be like, yeah, sure, we just get it. Either way, it's not going to affect my future goals. But for people whose budget is a bit tighter, they would have a bit more hesitation. But at the end of the day, they're just trying to do a bit of mental accounting when it comes to whether they can afford it or not lah.
Yes. So usually I'll see that they are struggling with that decision, of whether to purchase the car.
Yeah. So there must be a better way to plan for this, right?
Yes, there's a better way to plan for this. I think mainly, as I've mentioned before, that it's important to note that, so a car is a big ticket item, yeah. And like I mentioned with the example of those who hesitate, right? The first step is really to lay out all their goals together, including the car ownership goal. Yeah. So for clients who approach us, usually the first step is really to understand them at a deeper level. And from that conversation, usually we want to then take a look at, or really dive deep into, what are all the essential goals. It's during these conversations, as we lay out what is important, that when it comes to the topic of car ownership, it becomes easier for clients to actually make a decision. Yeah, because it's always easier to compare priorities, right, than to look at a certain goal on its own in silo.
So if in the deep conversations, do you so you ask them, on the topic of car, like whether they really need it, or what kind of car do they want, point A to B. I know at Providend we don't, we are not monitoring the COE trends and all that kind of stuff, but the conversations that we have with clients is more about them understanding what they really want. Is that correct?
That's right. So actually, what's interesting is that when we first start the conversations, of course, we start with the overall view, what they're looking for, and what are some of the top of mind priorities, right? But at the start, we also want to find out what are some of their personal values, especially when it comes to money values or their usual habits in managing money, right? And through this conversation, it's interesting to understand or that some clients actually come to a realization or a self-reminder that, I actually manage money in a certain way, right? And I feel comfortable spending or not spending in certain ways. And then when this topic when the topic of car ownership comes in, sometimes that conversation of their money values actually would influence the way they think about the car purchase as well.
Right. So it's like whether they buy first hand or second hand, whether they own or lease, or are they looking for a point A to B car, or they want a car with a certain brand.
That's right. So it could really be a discussion about, when it comes to the car purchase, they would actually compare it back again to what are their money values, what are they actually trying to achieve for their long-term goals in terms of their overall wealth plan. Yeah, so you're right. Sometimes it could be a case where they start off thinking that, I want to have a comfortable, good car, a branded car because I want my family to be, ferried around in comfort, right? But after the conversation, they could think that, I actually just need something more functional. And then if I could channel some of the other resources for bigger goals, then perhaps the car is something that I don't need such a fancy car. So it could be an outcome like this. But the process, it doesn't matter which direction it goes, right? But the important thing is that after this conversation, it becomes easier for them to make a decision on such so-called big ticket items or what is perceived to be a discretionary expense.
Okay, Ray, so after the conversations with the clients, they really decided that they want to go first hand, they want a car that is point A to point B, etc. And all that are established already. So quantitatively, we still have to do the math, right? How whether they can afford it, in terms of cash flow, in terms of their financial ratios. So quantitatively, how do you go about planning for a car purchase for a typical client?
As a start, we'll always take note of we'll do a cash flow analysis, during the planning phase, right, to understand what are the current cash flow needs, right? So typically, what's the day-to-day expenses like, for essentials, for other discretionary spending, and then after that, then of course we will want to take note of what are some of these, some of the key financial ratios, whether they still servicing mortgages, do they have the loans or liabilities to take note of? Yeah, and when we have a clear picture of what their cash flow picture looks like, we also want to take a look at what are the current assets, whether there's liquid or non-liquid assets together. Usually with a picture, with an overall picture like this, we are able to determine whether it's possible for them to just set aside a lump sum to fully pay off a car, right? Or to actually consider taking on a loan. Yeah.
Right, that's a good point. So what about if it's jointly funded with a spouse, for example?
Yeah, so these are the considerations more of where the resources or the assets that they have. Yeah, if a spouse or a partner comes in and wants to jointly own the car, then actually most of the time they have more resources, right? Then perhaps it becomes easier to actually pay off a car in a lump sum, or for servicing loan, it becomes on the cash flow side, it becomes easier for them as well.
Right. So Ray, how does integrating this into our financial plan help us with other life goals?
Okay, so from the financial analysis side of things, right? As I've mentioned before, in the planning process, we don't just work on one goal, right? We'll put together all the goals that are important for the client, and then we'll also lay them out, or we'll factor them into the cash flow analysis. So similarly to how we described about the cash flow needs for the car, right? The overall analysis also have given us a breakdown of what are the other needs for the other goals. So say, for example, we will also be planning for, say, a regular savings for children's education or for retirement, for example, right? And we'll stack them up together, right? So, of course, the objective at the end of the analysis is to ensure that these needs are within the cash flow needs of the client.
Right, so this is to ensure that their assets are efficiently allocated also.
Well, you can put it this way. Well, ultimately, what we are trying to achieve is that can we plan in a way that all the goals of the clients are met? Yeah, and so it is a function of being able to set aside resources, right, for all the goals that are important for them.
Right, so if not, the plan will allow them to see what trade-off they have to make with other goals like their retirement goals or their children's education goals, for example.
Yeah, that's right. So usually that's why when it comes to the analysis stage, we usually have to work with different scenarios. We have to come up with different scenarios, right? Throughout the process, the client would come to the realization of what are the priorities, how to prioritize all the goals. So naturally, I mean, they will. People also want to work within their financial means, yeah. And then using cash flow analysis or using cash flow modeling, we can show them what are the potential different scenarios and trade-offs. So if they spend more today on a fancier car, would they actually have to sacrifice more for their retirement goals in the future? Yeah, so we can run different scenarios for them to actually visualize how the impact is like for them. So after such this process, it comes down to them having the data, having the information to make that decision. So if they do have to trade off and sort of sacrifice their goal or their ideal car, it might still be easier because they see that, okay, what I'm sacrificing here can be put to better use for goals that I now feel is more important.
Okay, thanks, Ray. So in summary, planning for car ownership, it has to be planned, or rather it has to be integrated in your overall wealth plan. But as we know, COE prices can fluctuate quite significantly from year to year, especially, as of recording, COE prices are, in the 6 digits. How do we deal with this fact that COE prices can fluctuate even as much as the price of a car?
Yeah, so this again emphasizes the importance of having the plan or having the plan in the first place. As I've shared so far, so assuming a client has already done the planning work, right, at this point in time, they would have a clear view of what are their goals and what are some of the resources that they need to set aside for all these goals. And say, for example, if COE prices have just doubled, right, and the need for that budget for the car actually has gone up, then it becomes a lot easier to have a discussion again, right? When we sit down and review together, we can then have that discussion again. Okay, what are some of the factors can we consider? Are there any areas of buffer that we can leverage on? Say, for example, for certain clients, maybe there was a healthy bonus declared. Maybe they can use this resource and channel that towards the cost of the higher cost of a car purchase. Yeah. In other cases, perhaps then it could be a discussion on whether should we delay that purchase decision, right, and practice some delayed gratification. Yeah, but knowing with intention that it is because of they do not want to disrupt their plans for other goals as well.
Right, so in summary, regularly reviewing your plan would allow you to still make sure that your assets are efficiently allocated, but at the same time, with different macro factors, you can actually have the same conversation again. Whether you still want the car with prices being this high now, in terms of affordability, whether you can afford it, with these new prices, for example.
Yeah, that's right. I would say that having done the plan gives someone a very solid foundation. Yeah, because the external environment will always remain dynamic, and it's about knowing how to make changes accordingly while still keeping our overall goals in mind. I think that is where I would say that's where the value of having a good and comprehensive plan at the start really helps.
So that's all for this week's episode. Thanks, Ray, for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. It's a pleasure being on this episode.
Yeah. So to all our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our episode on car ownership planning. If you like this episode, follow our podcast and follow us on social media for similar contents. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. All analysis, views or opinions from interviews, recommendations and other information broadcasted, podcasted or published herein are provided for general information purposes only. Information expressed does not take into account any specific situation, particular needs or objectives, and should not be construed as specific advice or a recommendation. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal or tax professional before taking any action. Providend Limited does not accept any liability for any loss whatsoever arising from any use of the information broadcasted or published herein. All contents and information contained herein may not be copied or reproduced in whole or in part by any means without prior written consent of Providend Limited.